Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start off by just talking a bit about where you've been, because it's been a pretty good run for you in terms of years. You started in an election that was, for those who weren't in the city, an election that was a very, very close. Just remind us of how that was.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity, and the people in Melrose have been very, very good to me and my family. Yeah, it was not easy. It was right at the election was in 2001, right after 9/11, one of the worst dramatic events in the nation's history. And at night, on election day, we went back to, we were at the VFW, and it was tied. It was literally tied. 18,000 votes cast, an incredibly high turnout. And it was tied between myself, at the time president of the Board of Aldermen, and Richard Conley, great guy, was chairman of the school committee. And the next morning, we went to the election office in which they had provisional ballots, four provisional ballots. Say you went to the Horseman School to vote and you had just moved into town and somehow the paperwork didn't get there. They let you vote, but they put it to the side to ensure that your ballot is legitimate. The next morning, one was for me. The second was for Richard Conley. The third one was for me, and the last provisional ballot was blank. So I win by one vote. That's where they get to be the one vote. The one vote, and of course we all remember the Gore-Bush election that was just a year earlier, just like that. So there was a recount in which they went through every single ballot, and I ended up winning, I think, by 6 or 7. And the community was incredibly divided. Incredibly divided. It was probably the worst possible situation to become mayor in. But it really has worked out. The people of this city, as I said before, have been cooperative, and we've had a wonderful run.
And it just goes to a topic that we've discussed before. Every vote counts. You can't sit back and then complain about the results, because a single vote can make a big difference.
And I would also argue this. People often think that they're going to vote for president or they're going to vote for governor, which is, you should vote for president and governor, but the fact is local government is the level of government that affects the things that mean the most to you so intimately. Your children, your property values, your parents, your quality of life that you feel and touch every day, yet so many people don't come and vote for local elections when I think we all know it's very hard to change Washington, D.C. They've tried it probably for 200 years, right? And it's almost impossible, very difficult to change Beacon Hill in Boston. But you can change your neighborhood, and you can change your local government for the better.
Yeah.
Or for the worse.
Or for the worse, right. Now, you've talked about at that time, that the election, the first time you were elected, that the city was divided. Obviously, from the vote count, we could see that. How did you approach your first days in office to try to win over people to what you were trying to do? Well,
it wasn't only the election. As you remember, many people have just moved to the community recently. Mount Hood was a major issue. There was up to 1.5 million tons of what was deemed to be contaminated fill from the Big Dig, which had divided the community. There was the fact that the middle school was basically condemned. Yet there were students there, and there was no real direction where we were heading. The economy had basically seen a real collapse after 9/11, in which in my first month we almost didn't make payroll. So there was a lot of things to deal with. The first thing I tried to deal with was taking the politics out of the mayor's office as much as you can, and bring in Rich Conley, who was incredibly gracious, and some of his key people who I had respected. And this was a very dignified race. You know, Rich and I ensured that it was going to be about issues. Our families were close. We had both come to Melrose for a better life from the city of Everett. And it was very easy, although it was a very difficult election, to get those people on board. I still remember meeting with Gene Gorman and people on the Board of Aldermen and so many others that were, the election's over, we're going to help Melrose, we're going to help you. I was, 29 years old. Probably, as I can say 14 years later, unprepared for the position in terms of experience and worldliness and basically the management structure of, ultimately, which is a $100 million business with 1,000 employees. And I had to grow into the job, but I needed help. And some of the people that were opposed to me, so opposed to my election, not personally, but they felt I was not the best candidate, ended up being the people that helped stabilize the city during those times. That's a testament to our community.
That's great. So let's talk about some of the accomplishments during your term. I know there a lot of things have happened.
Yeah.
Start with infrastructure, because that's a big one.
You know, the first reaction when you inherit a situation that was so dire is to not think big, and we had to think big. Melrose was a great place to live, but there were a number of issues that, due to in some cases, our psychological makeup as a community, we kicked the can down the road. And one of it was infrastructure, one of it was development, one of it was investing in ourselves. It was, I think people called it that old Yankee mentality of don't spend any money and just make sure, you know, a smile. People used to laugh, say that every week there used to be ducks walking by the gazebo on the front page. There was never any problems. We wanted to acknowledge the problems and do our best to solve them. I mean, why aren't you in this business other than to solve big problems, particularly a young man that wants to do big things for the community? The city, as you know, flooded. I mean, people don't recognize the fact that yesterday we had about 3 to 4 inches of rain within about a 2-hour period. There would have been boats on the Fellsway. People would have had to probably leave their homes, not as many as, say, the Mother's Day storm. But the Roosevelt would have been flooded. I remember as a kid going to the Roosevelt school, and there'd be sewage in the school. They'd mop it up, and we'd be eating tater tots the next day. Same as the middle school. It was a rite of passage, as you know, to get a week off every year because of flooding. Raw sewage.
Right.
Now there'd be a class action suit, but back then, you know, when school was open, school was open. And we had to change that. It wasn't acceptable that you bought a home and it flooded with sewage. So we took on that issue in a small way in the beginning in terms of identifying how poor our infrastructure had been maintained. And not just infrastructure, there were fires in this city that couldn't be put out. There were at least 2 fires where the hydrants didn't work. We estimated, John O'Brien at the time was Captain John O'Brien, said 25% of the hydrants in this city didn't work. Now you assume that you live on a street that a hydrant works. That wasn't the case. We were losing a tremendous amount of money in water and sewer, which we were being charged in the MWRA through leakage, inflow, and infiltration. We had to take it on. The Board of Aldermen, even though we were doing tough things, agreed to do that. It culminated really into 2 major projects. One was the Ward 2 project, in which I would say at least 20% of the neighborhood which we currently live was uninhabitable. Literally, the homes were worthless. And as you know, from being there a lot longer than I, it really dramatically affected people's lives, and there was a hopelessness. And that the biggest investment you're going to make was filled with sewage. Right. The second was in Ward 5, which very similar things happened right off the Fellsway in Washington Street, where that entire half of it were brought out in boats regularly. Then the fact that we have a major heart of the city, where we have all our athletic fields, where we have all our major schools, where up to 2,000 children and adults go every day, which is off the Fellsway, would flood, again, with sewage. Problem was Bell Pond, as well as the fact that when the city grew after World War II and in the 60s, they did not account for the infrastructure along with the new growth. So underground, you would have 2-lane highways going into 4-lane highways, going into 2-lane highways, which caused backlogs. It was a very poor way of doing things. Granted, the technology wasn't there back then. I'm sure the pressure was there to build. But if you look at our neighborhood maps of 1900, you will see Heseltine Pond, where we currently live.
Right.
Roosevelt School, same part of L Pond. You just can't put dirt on ground and call it a neighborhood.
Right.
And that's what was done for so long. And we attacked it. And I think it's one of the best accomplishments, although not the sexiest. There's no ribbon cuttings when it comes to ground. But I think one of the best things, when you talk about the neighborliness that we have, up to 26 homes in the Horace Mann neighborhood had to have pipes go through their backyard to make this happen. People whose houses did not flood.
Yes.
Incredible trauma. Took it out till we took out sheds, pools. Not a single person said no. And I think that speaks volumes about the neighborliness and the cooperation we have in this community. Right. And it worked.
Yes.
It worked.
Yeah.
Thank God. And that's good city engineering, good planning, good neighborhood communication, and you have to put some money into it.
And part of that money we are still paying for today.
Of course. But if you think about the return, the whole project was $6 million. Probably the next week after the project was done, we basically, as citizens, recouped that in terms of value.
Right.
And it's just not in Ward 2. Ward 4 was dramatically affected with Hell Pond. Ward 3 was affected. Ward 5 was affected. And then the work we've done at Mount Hood, Ward 7, and Ward 6 down below in the marshes off Slayton Road.
Right.
We've done a lot of work there. So it's a comprehensive view of the entire community, and your show that you did a few years ago really speaks to the fact that it allows us now to grow. It allows us to be more sustainable as a community and stop kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. Yes, that Melrose, the Mother's Day flood in 2006 was absolutely phenomenal from the standpoint.
It was the equivalent probably of last winter in terms of the snow with the rain. I mean, was it 14 inches of rain over
in a very short period of time? And when you go back and look at those videos and pictures, it's stunning, the change.
Yeah.
So,
but we now, I mean, when you drive through Melrose on a Saturday morning, coming down the fells under the bridge, the beauty of the athletic fields and the baseball fields and the new tennis courts and the Little League fields, literally 500 to 1,000 kids playing. If I wanted to paint a picture, a visual picture of what this community is all about, that would be that picture. And that picture, along with people's housing not filled with sewage, that's the picture I think we want to paint. A picture of outdoors, community, kids having fun, and the memories that last forever. And it all goes down to putting a pipe in the ground, to be quite honest.
All right, well, let's talk about a little different type of infrastructure, and the schools. Because you mentioned the middle school was a mess.
And the high school was a mess too.
The high school, Roosevelt School. Talk about the process and the schools that we've seen rebuilt and renovated, and you know, how has that helped the city?
Well, Boston right now is talking about over a multi-billion-dollar need for a school infrastructure. We've dealt with it over the last several years, which two things have been very positive. One is the school building assistance program has provided us a great deal of money, which is slowly not going away, but less. And the interest rates have been incredibly low. And with the recession, particularly in 08 and 01, the bids have been incredibly advantageous. As a quick aside, it was $50-some-odd million to build the middle school, high school renovation. What Wakefield just spent in terms of a new middle school was add another 20, 30 million onto that, and the timing of these projects have been incredibly advantageous for the city of Melrose. The decision to build a new middle school was the most important decision of our time. It was almost a revolution of thought in our community. Melrose had never successfully built a public works project in terms of there were still scars from the high school, right? There was the Mount Hood situation. People always talk about the tot lot and all these things that happened when I was a little kid. And they couldn't get over it. Right now, they had to believe that we could do it. And the middle school was a certain trust, a covenant between government and the citizenry that we could build a good school. And not only build a school, but build a campus, which is combined use. The theater is really built for the high school and for the community. The athletic complexes are built for the high school, not just the middle school. It was a beautiful, beautiful school that's used every night of the week. Every night of the week from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. The high school renovation was particularly important, as you know from your children and myself. The open space concept was awful.
Right.
Awful.
Never worked.
Never worked, and well, it was corrected, which fundamentally changed Melrose High School forever, along with the Marcoux Gymnasium that we did. Then you have the fact that the Roosevelt School was built earlier, which was great, and remains one of the largest schools in the city. The Lincoln School was built, and I would also like to say the Lincoln School. People talk about the Lincoln School. You know, having some of the more transient population in the community, was just named by the federal government a blue ribbon school, only 300 in the whole country. Their scores and achievement between incomes and special education are incredible success story in Melrose. Another beautiful school. All our schools are community schools. They're used from 7 in the morning to 10 at night. Now we are beginning to embark on a further high school renovation. We did a special project, the science labs at Melrose High School. The whole science department was redone, which every indicator shows that those jobs are the jobs of the future. As good as any college in the area. Again, 50% paid for by the state government. The high school renovation is a further renovation of Melrose High School. We can't build a new Melrose High School. It would be $120 million. But what I call it is the Fenway Park approach. Whenever you go to Fenway Park, something new, right? So when the kids come back and we have something's new. A lot of it is technology because the building was built for the 1970s. It was also security because there were no telephones in any of the classrooms or cameras or the securities that you now have to deal with in 2015. The open space of the library. Libraries are different now. Now libraries are more technology driven. My 10-year-old does his book reports on a laptop. My daughter does her homework on an iPad. It's not that they're not learning the reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're just learning them on a device. Right. Because I would say very few jobs require a pencil and paper, and most of it's done on some sort of device. That's the new way. We also have a window program and a frontage program at the Hoover School that was built in the 1950s. That is starting next year, along with the high school project. That's, again, 50% paid for by the state. So we also did a number of green energy. Melrose High School is run by electricity. Now, look at your electric bill. That's been converted. We have solar on top of the high school and the middle school. That is paying great dividends, actually paying for the energy, most of the energy costs at the high school. As I said, the Hoover School, these schools built in the 50s need to be rehabbed. I mean, you build a school in the 50s, that's 60 years old, right? And we put new heating system and air quality system at the Winthrop School. Also the fact that reopening the Franklin School as an early childhood center after the school was basically empty for a long period of time was a major move by the community. Although not a new school, was an incredibly excellent investment. It's now the third largest school in the city of 3- and 4-year-olds. So our school stock is in relatively good shape. The Horace Mann is older, Winthrop is older, but as a whole, we've kept up with it. And other cities are coming behind us, Stoneham and Wakefield, again. Nothing is cheaper than it is today to do.
Right.
And sometimes people don't get that. And they say now's not the time, or you know, when things get better. It's always a losing approach.
Right.
It's always a losing approach.
Now, in terms of the schools, just to finish that up.
Yes.
Do you think, except for smaller projects, that we're in good enough shape now that we don't need to build another school?
The only issue that we're going to have is this: the biggest challenge we're going to face in this community is the massive demographic change. And I'll give you an example. 10 years ago, the largest percentage of people in this city, at about 45 to 48%, was people 60 or over. In 10 years, they have gone from the largest to the smallest. The largest population in the city right now, at that same percentage, are people between the ages of 35 and 50. The second largest population, at a very close margin, is 18 and under. So the answer to your question is no, because if this is a trend, which we're currently doing a demographic study right now, which people that are much smarter than myself talk about trends, then we are going to have to look at possibly at some point reopening another school that might have been closed in the past. We have not seen an influx of young families into this community since the early 1970s, when my family moved here from Everett, and many others did also. Right. Now, people enjoy selling their homes for $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, which we all can say. I don't want to say they're not worth that, because the market will tell you what something's worth, but it's certainly on common sense would dictate that it's not worth that. The people that are moving into this community are young, they're smart, and they have options. And they are not just buying houses my wife did and I did, so happy to own a home. They are spending an incredible amount of time studying the communities, which they're going to put $500,000 down on. Right. Very different. Right. And if we are closing the doors on them in terms of the future, they will not come here. And that is a clear and obvious point. So the challenge we're going to face is the changing demographics and how to deal with that, as we did in the 70s. Let's
talk a little bit about development in the city, and private investment and public investment. Yeah.
Sure. So we talked about kicking the can down the road with the issue of infrastructure. We also had two problems with Melrose. One, a lot of our businesses throughout Melrose were businesses that were kind of coming to an end in terms of the Walmart and Target and all those places. And the scare was that we were going to end up with an empty downtown. Secondly is the fear of development, responsible development in Melrose. Melrose was always afraid. I always used to hear it will be like Saugus or it'll be like Malden. So therefore nothing could be developed. The idea that you could have properties working for the city's best interest, that, in particular in a city that's 96% residential. So Oak Grove Village was the first big site that really changed the dynamics. People said the Main Street traffic would be at a standstill, it would be an awful development. It's changed the community in that a lot of people that live in these apartment buildings come and then buy. They fall in love with our community and they buy. The railroad corridor near Oak Grove, that smart growth concept of private investment around public transportation, targeted areas that where you can have the least amount of impact. That has been wildly successful in Melrose and has really sustained us during the dramatic cuts in local and state aid. The other part is reforming our Main Street and our business districts, making them relevant in a world where people go to the mall or Walmart or Target. And I think we've done that working with business, in particularly the infrastructure we've done in the commercial nodes, particularly the Highlands, Main Street, Cedar Park, and Wyoming. Making it friendlier for moms with carriages or dads with carriages, the elderly, bicycles, pedestrian accommodation, and really focusing around our train stations, which are really our hubs for commuters and for people not from Melrose to sustain local business. We literally have almost no occupancy downtown, and if you look at Stoneham or Wakefield or other communities, they have, in some cases, 40% occupancy. Why is that? Strong Chamber of Commerce, strong relationships with government. The change of the liquor laws was particularly important. We've gone from coffee shops, which we have plenty of, and they're wonderful, to also having dinner in Melrose and being entertained and being a dining hub. We're looking to do that in Highlands, which we have a new restaurant moving in. Lorenzo from Coffee Tea and Me and La Cuchara is going to open up a third restaurant in Melrose. So what people want, I believe, young and old, is to eat and to be entertained in their own community. Family-friendly, safe, close to home, and that's what we've become. And that is a fundamental change from the dry town that was afraid of a 3-unit condo going up, that we become Saugus overnight, or the bad things that would happen, the boogeyman. What we have now is a thriving downtown that's relevant in 2015. I call it the Pawtucket for the Boston Red Sox, which are beautiful apartment buildings that are adding to their community with people that end up buying homes here. Along with incredible private investment. And as you know, people that make private investment in the community are looking at the future of the community, not just the present. And they're banking on Melrose being a strong investment for them in the long run, and they're committed to staying here.
Okay. In the time we have left, let's talk a little bit about some of the city departments and the changes that you've seen, you've instigated and overseen. Public Works, Police, Fire.
Public Works is now not just into picking up trash. Our focus has been on recycling and green energy. We've used some privatization, like our trash program, which saved a lot of money, but also having our guys do the fields and the parks, and I don't think they've ever been better maintained, as well as snow removal, which I think has improved. Fire department is no longer really a fire department. It's an emergency management department. We brought in an ambulance that was an ALS ambulance, by the way, the highest level you can have, which not only provides, I believe, a better service for Melrosians, but whose revenue pays for 10 firefighters, taking them off budget. Our police department has seen a massive influx of new police officers. Most of them have served our country in Iraq and Afghanistan. They're young, they're smart, they're energetic, and they want to remain as community police officers. The opioid and heroin issues that we have as a nation have hit us hard, as every community. But their focus has been on as much social work as it is police work, and I think the new police officer is so incredibly better trained than I think we were 30 years ago, and I think we're a safer city because of it.
You mentioned police officers, a lot of them having served in the military.
Yes.
Just talk a little bit about veteran services, because that has become a big focus with all of the veterans returning. And talk about our Veteran Services Office.
Well, about 6 years ago, our budget was about $38,000. Now it's $500,000. And it is a social service agency. It is a job finding agency. It is a shoulder to cry on. It's a service agency for families who have issues coming back from war. But it's also a department that celebrates our veterans and advocates for our veterans, including war memorials and parades. Ryan McLean and the Veterans Advisory Board, which we formed, have done so much work. So well, they've done so well that they took over actually Saugus and Wakefield in a regionalized approach that is award-winning. in the state, and I think that's one of the things I think I am most proud of, is that when you are a veteran of the city of Melrose, we take care of you, and we take care of your family when you're here or serving abroad.
Right. Okay. And finally, just mention the health department,
yeah,
which similarly has gone beyond our shores.
The fact is this: in these economy, in these times, and by these times I don't mean a temporary. The new norm now is 1 to 2% growth at best.
Right.
We have to regionalize services. Now, does that mean a lesser service? In some cases it does, but more often than not it doesn't. It just means a more stabilized service that can be sustained for a long period of time. Departments where all the laws are the same, like health, are perfect opportunities, and in fact work better. Melrose, Wakefield, and Reading have a combined health department. We're able to deliver flu shots and vaccines in a more easily approached, manage restaurants, manage public health issues, things like substance abuse, things like healthier living. All of these things done by a regionalized basis make us more prone to good grant writing and good grant awards, as well as making sure that those programs continue. Because what happens if everyone has their own program, times get tough, real tough, they get eliminated. And once things get eliminated, they don't come back in local government. Right. That's what we're trying to avoid. And we have strong people, good people running those departments.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I wish we had a little more time to talk about your vision for the future, but perhaps we'll do that at another time.
For sure.
You've got another 4 years coming, and we look forward to what's going to happen in those 4 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.